today we're going to be focusing on how to redefine the agency business development process. And when we think about this, and I know we had a great speaker and lecturer from another agency owner, I think a couple weeks ago, and he really focused on content generation and how to utilize AI to kind of build, as Drew uses the analogy of deer food, right? How do we create that deer food that we can help people come to us? I wanted to focus a little bit more on today, more of the prospecting side and outreach side as it pertains to kind of cold prospecting, analyzing your different audiences and your prospects. So, as an agency owner, I'm sure, like many of you guys, I spent so much time trying to find the right business development leader in my organization. And what I've realized is oftentimes I was probably the best one to handle it, but I just didn't have enough time. And so what I've found is really with AI, you can still be the leader, you can still push things forward, but you're able to utilize AI to make it a little bit less cumbersome in getting some of that outreach done. So we're going to talk through a little bit of that today. And please feel free to put questions in the chat or ask anything. And then I'll actually be walking you through a live how to build a live custom GPT for sales and business development follow-up. So we'll talk first about, just some of the baseline use cases for agency business development. Then we'll talk about how to use it for research and discovery. If you have done the Mercer Island group, Selling with Strategic Insights, it's absolutely incredible. And one of their big things is really understanding your prospective client's industry, their unique perspectives, how they can stand out. And so we're going to talk about how you can use AI to shorten that process a little bit more or make it a little less cumbersome. If you guys have been to that Mercer Island group, Selling with Strategic Insights, you'll know that it is a lot of work. So anything you can do to kind of help lighten that load is huge. We'll talk about how it can be utilized for personalization and outreach. And then finally, how can you utilize it to help with training? Right? Oftentimes, as a business owner, we are the head of business and sales, but sometimes we might want to start cultivating a few other members of our team to start taking on that responsibility. Especially as we're seeing right now in the agency world, things are just moving a lot slower from a deal pipeline perspective. So when we look at this, I'm just going to click that, and then we'll follow up with Q&A. So when we talk about the importance of utilizing AI as it pertains to business development, there was a great study done by McKinsey towards the end of last year that looked at, those organizations that are investing in AI are seeing an increase of revenue about 13 to 15%. And they're seeing their sales actually increase about 10 to 20%. So when you think about this, right, there's always that, and I always joke that it's a Michael Scott quote from The Office, but I know it's a quote from a quote, right? You can only make the baskets of those that you take, right? And so much of business development and sales is making sure that you're doing the follow-up, making sure that you're pushing people forward. And so I think this is a really good illustration of that this can work and this can help us move the needle. So when I think about the 6 different ways, there's so many ways that AI can be used in business development and sales. Obviously, in our last webinar that Drew has put on for the AMI group, it was talking a lot about content generation and thought leadership, but we're going to be focusing on a few of the other pieces of this. So the first thing I really love to use AI for as it pertains to business development is utilizing it to help you build your ideal customer profile. How many times have you worked your butt off to win a new business client only to realize that they're not the right fit for you? And you end up churning them fairly quickly. And that's not because your organization's maybe not providing the right services. It's because it's not a good match or right fit. And so one of the things that you can do is if you have a CRM database, utilize your current customers to provide analysis of who are those customers that are really your niche customers. I've also included typically in mine a scoring. So I have a list of my customers, a lot of their data demographics, who we sold to, size of the contract, services, things of that nature. And then I put like a little score on them. So I'll say like, this is a 10 out of 10 client, meaning they're the best. And then I use that as a way to help me really kind of detach from the emotional impact of what clients I like the best, and really identify which clients are the best for our organization. So I always recommend starting with that, and it's a great way to do that. The second one is content personalization. So utilizing AI generative tools like ChatGPT, you can really help craft personalized emails, scripts, and outreach content that's specific to each prospect's needs and their industries and preference. This will help you increase your engagement on those emails and outreaches, as well as kind of the resonance of what you're saying and trying to sell in. The next one is sentiment analysis. I have a few, obviously, developers in my old firm, right? They struggle sometimes with sentiment analysis. And one of the things I learned in my first job ever in marketing and advertising was the ability to match people. Oh, we have a visitor. Charlotte, thank you. I was on a call. Sorry about that. That is my 3-year-old Peanut, Charlotte.
Like visitors.
Yes. She delivered a package, so that was wonderful. But one of the things I've always learned, so my first job in my career, my boss told me I was in charge of business development and sales. And he said, people like to work with people who are a reflection of themselves. And so if they start the email with like, hi, or hi first name, or how dear so-and-so, you should mimic that back to them, like almost like a mirror. And so one of the ways that you can really do this with AI is uploading emails from your prospects or your clients and having them analyze the sentiment of the email, identify potential pain points, ask them to maybe provide a strategy in terms of what tone you should respond in. And I've done this a couple times just to see and test out. And it's really interesting the different types of responses I get when I'm layering this into my kind of outreach or upselling approach. And the next one is lead scoring. So lead scoring is something that you probably already have in a lot of your CRM. If you guys are leveraging a CRM, you have lead scoring automatically going on. But oftentimes that's based on a job title, based on size of employees or employee count, things of that nature. But what I found is sometimes there are these tangible data points that actually help drive your lead scoring up. So one of the things when I analyze this, looking at some of the data points, if the lead for the RFP or the outreach was a female, we actually had a higher closing rate than if it was a male. Not sure why. Wasn't something I initially included in my lead scoring, but we tended to work really well with other women who were in CMO positions. And I think a part of it had to do with the fact that I was an agency owner and a female-owned business. And so they liked and appreciated that fact. So just some things nuances you might find when you kind of do some of this lead scoring. The other piece is sales forecasting. Especially after going through a transaction and going through a sale, you're asked to forecast all the time in terms of what will revenue look like in June, what will revenue look like for next year, the end of this year, things of that nature by month. And if you know anything about this industry, you're like, that's like asking me to predict the weather. I'm going to be wrong most of the time, right? And so if you're able to utilize, if you have a dashboard or a Salesforce or some type of database where you have data around when you initiated it, like when a lead contact was opened, how long it stayed open, that could give you an idea of closing ratio. And it can really help you figure out where your revenue is coming from and have a better feel for what revenue will look like, what staffing needs to be, and be able to plan accordingly. Obviously, the sales forecasting side of using AI, you really have to have a CRM to be successful in that. And then the last one is automation. There's so many ways that you can set up AI-powered triggers and actions that automate the routine prospecting tasks, like follow-ups, information access, or responding to customer interactions promptly. I've always remembered, I think it was in Good to Great, there's an example or a case study of Southwest Airlines. And one of the things that always stood out to me was their focus on time arrivals, right? That was their biggest metric that they were focused on. And what I found in the agency world is sometimes that's the same as it pertains to agencies, right? There's potentially somebody who can do it slightly better. But one of the biggest complaints every time we were being brought in and replacing another agency, one of the biggest things we've always heard was they're so slow. And delivering what we need. And so even simple interactions like, thank you so much for this email. Let me connect with my team and get back to you. Automating some of those responses creates this feeling and emotion from our prospects that they're the most important customer to us. And so those things can be really automated now with AI that seems way more personable than, having these like what I'll call like standard responses go out. So we're going to focus on a few things today, but one of the things I wanted to start with is really around prompting. I'll be talking a lot about ChatGPT in particular, but I do think you guys, I use ChatGPT, Perplexity, Opus. I use a wide range of tools, and I use them for different things. Obviously, Perplexity for my research. OpenAI, I love because I can include URLs and it'll fetch that data. So I'm not having to copy and paste as much. And I can create custom GPTs and create a lot more automation. Opus, sometimes I feel like it's the best understanding of my writing. And so when I'm doing thought leadership, I try to do a little bit more in Opus. But if I'm doing some responses to things, I'll utilize ChatGPT because I want to automate it all. So, everyone always asks, well, which one should I pay for? And it depends on what your goal or objective is. But one thing that remains the same across all of them is how can we prompt them or how can we initiate these conversations in a way that gives us the best return? And so this reminded me, it was when I was in college, there was a big fad of like eat this, not that books, where it would have like a picture of like, Chick-fil-A, don't order this, order that. And so I kind of wanted to walk y'all through a few examples of, instead of doing this, try this to get the correct output that
I
you're
got my
looking
wires crossed. I realized I told you one thing and said
Whoop, mute, 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 kids.
for. So the first one is context is key. So, I think about this a lot too when I explain things to my kids, right? My son is playing t-ball and I was like, oh, buddy, you're going to have to run home if you run all the way home if you make a big hit. And he was like, mommy, that's way too far. And I realized he thought I meant like our actual house and not home base, right? And so when you think about AI, they understand a lot, they have a lot of knowledge, but sometimes you have to provide context like, no, like the home plate, not our home. So you need to be clear and specific about your requirements and to get the most relevant and helpful responses. So instead of saying, write an email to a prospect, say, hey, draft an email to a prospect named Sarah. Sarah's company is a growing startup with around 50 employees looking to leverage advertising to drive new sales. They have shown interest in our digital media advertising services. This email should introduce our services, discuss how it can address their needs, and propose a date for a media audit review, right? That gives them enough information to get a much better layer one draft from the get-go. The second piece is setting the right tone. Oftentimes, depending on what tools you're using, you might say, oh, it doesn't sound like me. It's too stuffy or too professional, things of that nature. So I've often, and I play around with this a lot, is make sure you specify the tone that it wants. This way you can match the tone of your AI responses to your brand guidelines. Or oftentimes what I found to be really successful, especially in the business development world, is match it to theirs. So pulling their brand guidelines or their mission statements or things of that nature into my outreach helps them feel like we align from a cultural perspective, even in our everyday interaction. So one example would be draft an email to a long-term client about our new product. There's nothing technically wrong with that prompt. It's just going to be fairly limited and require a lot of reiteration and reprompting. So we would recommend, draft a friendly, warm email to join our long-term social media client, John, introducing our new product around CRM management. So this kind of gives them a few things. It gives them the client's name, gives them the tone that we want. It also helps them understand, okay, they're a long-term client and they've been using XYZ service and we're now trying to sell them up on CRM. So potentially look at kind of the connectivity between the two. And the last one is testing. There are so many different things that I see and it feels like it's constantly changing, but experiment how you phrase your prompts and choose the best results. And I have like a Word doc where I save all of the winners. And I will tell you this, even when I say, take on the persona of an SEO writer at an agency and take on the persona of an SEO expert in XYZ industry, I sometimes get better responses. There have been times where I was grading my MBA students' portfolio projects. And the first time I said, grade these, act as a professor at an MBA school and grade these things. And then I changed it to say like, take on the persona of a rocket scientist. And for some reason, the rocket scientist's answers seem to get less lazy than the others. So this is a great way to kind of get some variation and then save those so that you can use them again. So one example would be, instead of saying write this follow-up email, maybe it's compose a gentle friendly reminder email to a client who has missed our previous communication or hasn't responded yet. Or you can say something like, hey, let's try something quirky, right? A quirky email that is professional, but has a hint of humor that hasn't responded to our previous email. So just kind of to vary these and test them and continue to figure out which ones really align with what you're looking for, and then making note of that and saving them for future use. So as we go into this, we'll talk about how to utilize AI in a few key areas. And the first one is really how to use it to gather intelligence, right? I have found when I'm doing new business development or sales or prospecting, if I understand their business and I've taken the time to get to know their business, I have a better job of understanding and being able to communicate how our organization or my previous organization can add value. And so this is a prompt that I tend to use a lot for kind of understanding and analyzing an organization to get some initial intel. So I'll say, take on the persona of a business development VP at, and then I'll insert, whether it's a a digital healthcare advertising agency or whatever it may be, whatever your niche is, and provide me an analysis of, and then I would typically put the company name and URL, outline the company's key service offerings with a short summary, any accolades or awards, and who is their target audience. So who are they selling to? And be sure to review the website in full and provide a short bullet point information on the above, because I don't necessarily want a novel. I put in here key services, accolades, and awards, and their target audience, because to me, those are the three core pieces. But for example, if you are a home builder and you are a marketing agency that specializes in home building, you might ask questions about price point of their homes, things of that nature. You might have some varied, like, do you do spec only? Do you do custom builds, things of that nature? And so you might tweak this a little bit based on your agency's niche or industry. But the one thing I will say is I really like asking it for accolades or awards, because that helps you kind of create a reason for reaching out. So many people get reached out to because they say like, oh, we found this about your business and it's failing, kind of like we found this problem, if you will. But I've actually found that clients tend to be more receptive if you pull something good out. And it doesn't necessarily have to deal with their marketing or advertising. Oftentimes I'll use it, whether it's, I worked in healthcare, so it was a hospital that would get an award for doing some community outreach on food deserts and getting healthy foods into an area. And they've had a lot of big campaigns around that. And so I'll talk about the importance of that as it pertains to patient selection and preference on which hospitals they choose. And so how do we get more movement, or how do we take that good news and apply it to the marketing and advertising efforts? So you guys will obviously get a copy of this deck, so you don't have to worry about these kind of prompts, but I did want to include a few others as it pertains to intelligence gathering. Now, these aren't fully blown out prompts, but this gives you an idea, right? You still want to add some more context and some tone and maybe even a persona or an audience, but these are just a few that I've used to help me get more information about an organization that I'm prospecting. So summarize the trends and you'll put the industry category and how they impact. And you can either list, I typically go after their target audience. So summarize the trends in pediatric care and how they impact new moms or expecting moms. And that will give me some of the really interesting things that I can maybe start a conversation with on a prospect side. I've done this a lot. Obviously, I've done some work. One example would be I was working in the fertility sector. And so I said, summarize trends in fertility, innovation, and how they impact Gen Z. And so was able to find some nuggets on that I was able to share with our prospect about, I don't know if you've seen the recent research, blah, 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 but here are some things to consider and how digital advertising marketing can help reach that audience. Another one is one of the reasons I always ask for their target audiences, so I can kind of start to understand the demographic, psychographic, and behavioral characteristics of that target market. So this is a prompt I oftentimes use. So outline these things, these different big core areas of your target market and then I put in my client's product or service that they're trying to sell. Another one, this one for some reason lost its thread, but was analyze the strengths and weaknesses of, and I'll put in the competitor's name for my prospect, their URL in, whatever industry, and suggest potential areas that we can capitalize on or conquest on, if you will. Another one that I love for intelligence gathering is a lot of clients obviously are doing what we're doing, right? Webinars are huge in terms of helping, and education is huge in terms of helping us achieve success. And so one of the things I've done is I actually utilize video recordings or transcripts. Sometimes I'll use AI to help me write the transcript, but I might not have time to sit in my client's webinar on the impact of COVID-19 on the diminishing, it takes a village mentality of motherhood or something of that nature. But what I can do is have the AI kind of help me summarize that. And then I can write an email saying, I heard you had a great webinar and blah, blah, blah. I really found these three things interesting. And this is where I think our organization can help, is a great way to do it. Also, I don't know about you guys, but there have been several new business calls we've been on where we kind of really just try to get to know each other, understand what's keeping them up at night. We get off the call, we regroup, and there's like 3 or 4 of us, and we all heard completely different things in terms of what was important to the client or what were some of the key objectives. And so we actually will utilize AI to like upload our video recording of our meeting and help us understand like what were the key points of consideration, and what should we, as we go back with a more personalized and customized objective, how do we do that? So this is just a few prompts as we think about how do we gather intelligence and how do we move that forward from that perspective. Then we get into the outreach. And one of the things I love about where generative AI is going is it's the ability to take your services. And I know I specialized in healthcare, right? But that also times meant fertility clinics. Sometimes that meant primary care. Sometimes that meant academic medical centers, right? And they're all slightly different. And so having a single piece of content then be versioned for each of their industries used to take a lot of time, like a lot of our team's time. But now I'm able to do it a little bit more seamlessly. And so this is the prompt I typically use for personalized outreach or follow-up. So, take on the persona of a business development VP sometimes I'll do like, just for fun, take on the persona of a business development VP with a winning track record or something crazy, just to see if I get a slightly better answer than if I am not a, closer, BD lead. And you insert the niche at, blank advertising agency and provide me an outreach LinkedIn message and I'll put the name, title, the company name, and then the company URL. Have the message include and you just put your, products or services can help with their goal. So whether that's brand awareness, new sales, things of that nature, in the blank industry. So healthcare industry. At the end of the message, please include a link, or you would insert your scheduling link at the end, to schedule a 15-minute meeting with the person. And sometimes that was me. Oftentimes I would use that as myself. So the CEO, I think that was important that they were talking to the CEO and not somebody in business development oftentimes. And then how we can help them grow their business. And then we would say, like, please ensure that you have this type of tone. Some other ideas for personalized outreach and follow-up is, this idea of an attention grabbing prospect for a salesperson, targeting this certain type of audience who needs these types of products or services. This is, just another engaging introductory email for an agency reaching out to an audience for the first time. So like a cold email, if you will. This one is, how do you generate a friendly follow-up for a salesperson who had, whether it's a initial call, a audit review, a proposal review, and then you kind of create some information around what products or services they were interested in. So this helps with a lot of that, what I'll call like mundane kind of follow-ups that sometimes we lack and have a little bit less desire to do. And then, create a follow-up email for, inserting, whether it's like for our social media services or things like that, after a potential client attended a webinar about our platform. So things like that. So those are just a few outreach ones. And the other one I like to do is I've oftentimes find, right, the subject lines of emails are super important. And I know that plays a big role, but sometimes I have a hard time coming up with subject lines to include other than like or I used to say like decode plus company name, um, discussion, which was not always the most exciting. And so I oftentimes will say, considering the content in the email below, devise 10 high impact subject lines that would intrigue that recipient to open the email. Make sure that at least half of them are personalized and address the specific needs or challenges of, and I would insert the like email draft that I had. So that really does help. And sometimes it's not like, oftentimes I feel, especially in business development and outreach, they don't read it the first time. So when you send a follow-up email, you don't really necessarily need to change the body. It's probably better just to change the subject line. And this kind of helps you get some really good ideas. So the last way that we'll look at how to utilize AI as it pertains to business development is in training and creating some of that automation. So when we think about this, act as a CMO of, insert company size in this industry, and our agency offers, and you insert kind of the different products or service offerings that you offer, help me put together the right pitch and messaging for you. Draft a role play of a potential client interested in more information about our certain products or services before committing. And then I'll help provide information and details to make that decision easier. So this kind of helps you do a lot of those role playing, especially for, one of the things I've always struggled with was, I was often told like, well, I can never sell like you. And I think oftentimes they need that experience, even though at times it was painful to watch. But this allows you to have that experience without having to put anything at jeopardy. I put this one in because I know we got this a lot. Act as a prospect who's hesitant about the cost of our products or services. And let's discuss the values and benefits it offers. So these things are things that you can utilize to train other people or identify new ways of messaging some of the things that you've always held true. Sometimes when I do this one, I will actually ask them, I'll kind of give a response and they'll ask another question or something of that nature. And then I'll kind of push and say, what would you have like put yourself now in my shoe? What do you think would have been the right response to answer this question? And I get some really interesting ideas. Like I said, they're not always like copy and paste and move it out, but they're really some good baselines from that perspective. The other one is generating a 60-second sales script, asking if, this prospect's name and job title is struggling with an XYZ problem. And then include an anecdote about your prospect that's relevant. So whether it's like, we've had this recent Google algorithm change, and so having them draft that, I've oftentimes found, right, when we're doing cold outreach, I was oftentimes utilizing interns or people over the summer to kind of help with some of that. But I was always nervous about them actually making any outreach. But this is a great way. You develop a script and provide that to them to kind of try and get those really important secondary meetings set up. This one's actually my favorite because I always had this and I always thought it was weird. We typically in our sales process as an agency, we had an introductory call where we just tried to understand their challenges, objectives, and what they were looking for. We then had a presentation where we kind of outlined the world of possible and how we would solve it and how we think. And then oftentimes that would go to if it went well, a scoping or an estimate or a proposal that we pulled together. And then we'd have these like proposal calls where we'd walk them through the proposal. And it was always weird to me because I'm like, I sent you that proposal like a week ago. Like, do you want me to like sit here and read it to you? Like, this seems kind of awkward or weird. And so I actually started utilizing AI to help me draft a script based on our proposal so that it felt more natural and organic without me like reading through the estimate. And I oftentimes would have the end with like, they're asking, making sure we end with asking for questions or asking if they need, like if we need a response, like if you want to move forward with this and you're wanting to hit XYZ date for launch, we will need agreement on this contract by next Thursday. And creating that sense of urgency, because oftentimes it was always one of those weird things. I would be like so awkward for the first part of the call that I would forget that like to create that sense of urgency at the end. So this is one I really love and have used a lot. So I know that's a decent amount to go through and a short amount of time, but what I'm going to walk through next is how to build a custom GPT to help automate your sales response. I mentioned to Drew earlier, we had OpenAI is having some issues with its APIs right now. So I'm going to show you a different one than I was going to. But I will do a recording once OpenAI's APIs are up and running, and I can kind of utilize those tokens to show you how I built or how you can build a assistant that takes things from a Google form submission all the way through to a draft of your email in your Gmail or your Outlook calendar. So it will actually analyze the response commentary, draft based on guidelines, services, things of that nature, a response for that person, and put it in your Gmail. So you only have to look there. But today we're going to focus on possibly the second half of that. So you can kind of see how this can be done without kind of that full integration across forms. So I will share my screen shortly here and show my other one, which is over here.
We're still seeing the deck.
Okay, I'll just stop and reshare. Let's go desktop 2. All right, can you guys see the new screen?
We can.
Great. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom GPT. There's a couple ways to do this. So you'll see up here, these are the custom GPTs. So if you click Explore GPTs, and then up right here in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Create. So we will create a custom GPT for our sales or business development outreach. There are 2 ways to do this. We can do configure, or we can create it using like the ChatGPT builder, which is almost an AI that helps you build this all together. So what we'll do is we'll ask it. So
you guys will get the video for this. So if she's going fast and you're scrambling to take notes, just know you'll have the video to.
Yes. Yep. I'm going to create a auto responder a GPT drafts new business replies. Okay. All right, so I'm going to add my voice guidelines. Should be, wait, my downloads. Okay, so it is. I'll add these 2. Now, if you don't have voice guidelines for your agency and you don't have your services, and sometimes it can be finicky, you can actually utilize AI to help draft it based on your website or something of that nature. So I'm going to re-add this because it's being silly. There we go. And it's going to start generating the configure side of this tool. So it'll take a few seconds. And then just know as you kind of go back and forth, you can continue to add or revise things in here to really help you get to the final finished product. So what we'll do is, in the interest of time, I'm going to my contact. And I'm going to be using this myself, so I don't need any of these conversation starters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, these are my instructions that I have already, because I've done this one previously, but you can see it wrote all of those for us in here. But what I'm going to do, just because I've done this earlier, is just copy and paste in my old instructions. Now, one thing to note here is you'll be able to see, I actually added in the closing statement will invite the person to schedule a meeting through a provided Calendly link, or I'll just put scheduling link. It's not Calendly. And I put my link in. The goal is to ensure each response is engaging, informative, and aligned with our brand voice. So from there, what I'll do is we don't necessarily need Dolly, so we'll uncheck that. And we will create, I'm going to only share it with me. And we have created our custom GPT. And I'll show you how it works. But before I show you that, I kind of want to show you how you can take it to the next level. How can you create, right? Our goal with AI is not just transforming things, but how can we help it automate? So what I'll do next is, let me pull up this other link so I can show you this. All right, of course, I knew this would happen. We'll just see. I don't know if anyone's been following along on Sam Altman and some of those speeches or presentations and public speaking he's done, but I feel like they're reallocating some of these tokens and the computing power for their newer models, and therefore we've been having some issues. But this is the email responder for us. So I have a fake email here, so we can just see how it works. Help me draft a response for email. Oops. And I'm going to put in a fake email that I made. And in my instructions, I asked for 3 drafts. And so this is going to draft that. So you can see that it's working. It's taking Sarah, it's talking about the company's name. It's pulling that in. It talks about scheduling the meeting. It pulls in my speaking fees because she asked for about speaking engagements. So it talks about where my speaking fee starts at 5,000 plus expenses, but it's inclusive. So it provides all of that information for her and drafts that. But this would be so much more incredible if we could automate it into our Gmail. So I'm going to show you fairly quickly, as long as ChatGPT doesn't crap out on me, how we can do that. So what we'll do is you'll see here this idea or this ability to create an action. So you'll click here, you'll create this action. And what I use is there's this link, and I'll make sure that Drew has this, but also in the deck, there's these links so you can get them automatically. This is Zapier. So this requires a Zapier account, and you need to integrate your Zapier and your OpenAI or ChatGPT accounts. And you'll copy and paste this into your actions. And so you'll import through URL and you'll copy and paste this URL from this link. And this will populate all of the important information that needs to go here as it pertains to building the schema. It may take a few seconds. I feel like things are moving a little slow today on this platform.
While we're waiting to do that, if anybody has any questions, I'm watching the chat. So,
yeah. So import. Come on. I feel like they're doing some things. They must be working on some stuff because it has been having some issues today. But if it doesn't work, what I'll do is I'll show you how I've structured it and be able to walk y'all through this separately in the video that I can record for you guys. But typically when you put that in, you'll see some schema pull up on the left-hand side. And then what we do is we go in and we add instructions. That's not working for us. And so I will show you this one so that you can kind of see. So when you click on actions, this will pull up and you can kind of see, it'll say import from URL, and then you'll see this stuff populate on the left-hand side, which you don't have to touch. So you just ignore it. But then what you do is you add in this copy block. And this always stays the same. The only difference is the Gmail, the action here, and the configuration link changes. And so how you do that is you actually go to these actions. And there's multiple ways to do this, but this is, I think, one of the easier ways. You'll start here. If you go to this one, you would create a new action and you just start typing Gmail and this would pop up. And so you can say, create a draft, connect it to my Gmail account. I typically like to leave it so that the AI guesses the field because they'll utilize the content from the body from that perspective. And you'll see, you'll have to show all options. And so what you would do here is, this is your action name. So I copy and paste that back into my action. And where your configuration link is just the link at the top of the page. So you would just copy this link URL into the configuration link and you would save that. And so when you look at how this functions, and what I'll show you is if you copy and paste this, you'll actually get a response. And if you go, I'll just pull up my email real quick so you guys can see it. Just don't judge the
number of emails.
Yes. But you can see, right, this is what I've done previously, but it says this goes to Sarah Thompson. It has the subject line already in there. It has it already formatted. And all I have to do is click send. So this is just one ways that you can utilize AI to help from a business development standpoint. I'll be sharing a video on how to integrate this further. I've built it so right now with OpenAI tokens so that it actually automatically takes data from my Google form and in real time sets up all of my drafts in my email as soon as a response comes in or a request comes in. And then we'll customize based on the service, the industry, our pricing, things of that nature. And then alert myself in a Slack channel of new business opportunities. So it will say, hey, you've had a couple leads come in, you have drafts waiting in your inbox for you to review and send. So when we think about, the burden oftentimes many agency owners have on business development, this should help significantly. So that is kind of all I have today. I left 10 minutes for questions, but we'll open it up if anyone has anything. And as I mentioned, the instructions in terms of how to follow the process is here, which you'll get in the slides, and I'll create a video, but I'll be happy to open up to any questions anyone has.
Questions? That was technical. So feel free to ask technical questions or why would you questions.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you can probably not share the deck and then people can unmute if they have questions and actually chat with you.
Yeah.
Stunned silence.
Yeah. Shock. Terror, maybe. I don't know. Or exciting. Maybe they're already building their custom GPTs as we speak.
That's a lot of that. Yeah.
And never going to respond to a single email without having a draft ready for them to review.
Great content.
Yes.
Exciting.
Yeah.
If you don't have questions, do you have comments? Does this seem too hard, too scary, too complicated? You need a MBA to figure out how to do it. Are you doing it already?
So Drew, I can chime in here. Kathleen,
Great.
hi. Joel from Houston. Good to see you. Great presentation. So Drew, I'm definitely using some of these prompts to craft emails. These are definitely a lot more sophisticated and thought through. So thank you. This is going to be really helpful. Kathleen, I definitely want to double down on using some prompts also for the Mercer Island framework.
Yeah.
From the PR side, we're more on the PR side. So synthesizing information regarding sentiment is always a pain in our side because it's just, figuring out how to actually elevate all this data into an insight that really makes sense. And that has been transformational and how quickly we can actually create proposals. I've actually had one client in our final insight basically said, we could not have written this better. right? And it's not like we were taking directly out of ChatGPT. I mean, we were looking at these things and really massaging it and including client language. But it's the velocity through which I can get through this thanks to some of these prompts. So these are definitely going to help with the feedback. My only concern is if we all start using it, are we all gonna start looking the same, right?
Mm,
Yeah, and I think that's where like uploading and everything I've always done is I maintain a voice guideline to help really analyze certain words they don't want AI to use. And I actually use Opus to write the brand guidelines, and then I upload the brand guidelines to ChatGPT. But I find that that helps a lot from that standpoint. Obviously, I don't know if you've noticed, but ChatGPT has rolled out across the all paid clients memory, what they're calling memory. And I've played with it. So basically, it remembers everything that you've shared before and what things you did and did not like. And so, and it will tell you once they're like, it's basically going to wipe its memory, like wiped its memory as of XYZ date. And so I find that that should really be helping kind of improve that the content of it all. I also find what I found to be really successful is I have big, what I'll call like flagpoles of like, this is what I want to convey, or these are the things that I think are important. But I have a hard time sometimes like stringing them all together in a nice professional manner. And so I find that if you give the AI more information, you're going to help differentiate yourself from everybody else. Because if somebody just says, hey, draft a follow-up email, they're probably going to get very similar responses from everybody. But if you say like, hey, draft a follow-up email in this tone using these brand voice guidelines, and then be sure to include X, Y, and Z, you create that kind of differentiation that maintains what I'll call that like a thumbprint or fingerprint of your organization that still feels real.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kathleen, the other thing that I've been doing, especially on ChatGPT, like Gemini does this automatically, but using at the end of the prompt, like, tell me why you've done this, right? So it gives me a little bit of the framework of why this copy was created that way as a sort of a learning tool. So on the training side, that seems to be just a great for people that are starting to really understand the kind of persuasive language that's needed. That information synthesizes not just the content, but the why. And I'm finding that that is really, really helpful.
Yeah. The other thing you can do, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, so when you write a prompt, the AI tools will actually rewrite your prompt again before they actually, what I'll say, like send it over. And so you can ask, can you share the prompt that you actually used? And it'll send it back to you. And sometimes I find some really interesting nuggets because
Cool.
and you know, there are times where people are like, I don't understand why it's getting it wrong. And you ask that question back and it helps you identify like because AI is trying to be as helpful as possible, right? And so they identify like, okay, I don't have this info, like I need to understand the tone, or I need to understand the mandatories or the requirements. And so it's filling in some gaps with just some assumptions. And that might be what's turning or like steering it in the wrong direction. And so you can ask the different generative AI models, can you share what actual prompt you used, not the prompt I provided? And that sometimes I find to be helpful to get better ideas to upgrading my prompting.
This is brilliant. Had no idea. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I got.
All right. Now, fellow
Great.
Houstonian. Woohoo.
Other questions, comments, concerns, tips or tricks how you're doing this differently? Okay, last chance. We're almost at the top of the hour, so we need to go pretty quick. But again, I know that there was a lot of technical and how-to stuff in here, and Kathleen's going to record a couple of videos to walk you through all of it so you can see it in real time. So watch in the Facebook group, watch in the newsletter. Both the links to the newsletter is in the chat. So if you are not, if you don't get the newsletter every Wednesday, go ahead and sign up for that. So watch for the link in the newsletter, in the Facebook group. We try and share it on LinkedIn, but those are the places where you're going to get the replay links. So make sure you grab them there, and we'll be back for the final one of the season in about a month. So we'll see you guys then. All right.
And if
Thanks,
you try
Kathleen, as always.
yes, and if you try out your own GPTs and have questions, I will be a Baba. So I would love to like nerd out, bring your computer, and we can say, troubleshoot it or talk through it a bit more. So feel free to test and play with it. And I will see you guys in Denver.
Just picture like 10 of you around the bar with laptops open. So,
Yes, absolutely.
all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kathleen.
Kathleen, bye.
Definitely.